They're gone. They're gone.
What kind are they?
The big ones.
No, I'm serious. Are they the bad kind?
I have no idea.
This is the terrifying story behind Open Water. Everyone remembers the 2003 film for the sharks. The couple left alone in the ocean as the fins start circling. But the movie was inspired by something real: the disappearance of Tom and Eileen Lonergan, an American couple abandoned by their own dive boat on Australia's Great Barrier Reef on January 25, 1998. They were missing for 2 full days before anyone noticed. Their bodies were never found, and the truth is worse than anything on screen. The message in the water. For 6 months after the couple vanished, the sea stayed quiet. Then it handed back a message. In June 1998, a fisherman working the water about 75 miles north of the dive site pulled up a small, weathered board. It was a dive slate, the little plastic tablet divers carry to write notes underwater, since you can't talk with a regulator in your mouth. This one still had writing on it, in Tom or Eileen's hand. It was dated Monday, January 26, 1998, 8 a.m. It said the pair had been abandoned on the reef by the outer edge the day before, and it ended with a plea to be rescued before we die. And the date changes the whole story. They'd been left on the afternoon of the 25th. This was written at 8 the next morning. So Tom and Eileen didn't slip under in the first hour. They survived the entire night in open water, and when the sun came up, they were still alive, still clear enough to spell out what had happened and beg whoever found it to come for them. The slate settled one thing for good. They didn't swim off and get lost, and they didn't stay behind on purpose. They knew exactly what had been done to them, and they spent their last strength trying to be found. And that message almost never reached anyone. The slate had drifted for months and washed up dozens of miles away, found by chance by a stranger who happened to be on the water that day. A slightly different current, and their last words are still out there somewhere. What it can't tell us is what came after 8 a.m. on the 26th. Everything past that point is a theory, and each theory is worse than the last. The diaries. The first place investigators looked for answers was the couple's own words. After they disappeared, Tom and Eileen's private diaries were found and read, and what was inside took the case somewhere dark. The marriage wasn't in a good place. Both of them wrote about being unhappy with their lives and with each other. They both hated their jobs teaching. Eileen wrote that she felt she was losing herself in her husband, and that she believed he was developing a wish to die. Tom's own diary seemed to agree. In one line he wrote, "I feel that my life is complete, and I am ready to die." To some readers, that looked like a motive. 2 theories grew out of it. The first was that the Lonergans made a suicide pact and let the ocean carry it out. The second, worse one, was that Tom took both their lives out there. But most investigators pushed back on all of it. Plenty of people write bleak private things in a journal and never act on a word of it. And it clashes with the hard evidence. A couple planning to die doesn't scratch out a frantic note begging to be saved. The slate and the death wish can't both be true. The plainer answer is the one that holds up. Whatever was wrong between them, it didn't put them in that water. A blown head count did. The shark ending. That brings us to the ending the movie chose. In open water, sharks find the couple and finish the job. It's the image everyone walks away with, and it might even be right. But the proof for it barely exists. Most of the sharks living around that part of the reef aren't a threat to people in the first place. And the gear that drifted back told its own story. The dive jackets and the wetsuit that washed ashore didn't carry any of the marks you'd expect from an attack. There was no blood on them, no bite marks, no ragged edges from teeth. The only damage was a few tears that lined up with scraping against coral, not with a mouthful of them. One expert still holds out for the sharks. Ben Kropp, a veteran Australian diver who spent decades in those waters, thinks tiger sharks were the likely culprits. Tigers are genuinely dangerous, and Kropp says they tend to circle and wait for hours before they commit. In his view, once they moved in, the couple wouldn't have lasted long. So it lands between two answers: exposure or a shark. And a missing body settles nothing, because the open ocean almost never gives its dead back. To some people, the clean gear rules the sharks out. To others, it just means the sea washed the evidence away. The boat that counted 2 extra. Then there's a stranger possibility, one that says the couple didn't die at the reef at all. During the investigation, police spoke to the captain of another dive boat, who had visited the same spot the day after Tom and Eileen were left. According to him, his passenger count at the end of that trip came back with 2 more people than he'd started with. He also remembered hearing a couple of American voices in the group, even though every tourist booked on his boat was Italian and spoke only Italian. Put it together, and it points somewhere eerie. It would mean Tom and Eileen lived through the first night, saw a fresh boat show up the next day, swam to it, and blended in with a crowd of strangers. Then, once they reached shore, they slipped away and were never seen again. It's a haunting idea. Most investigators just don't buy it. It asks you to believe that 2 exhausted, dehydrated people treaded water for most of a day, reached a boat by pure luck, climbed aboard without one crew member noticing, and then chose to disappear on purpose. Possible. Barely. Likely? No. But it's the kind of loose thread this case is full of, and it feeds a bigger theory that the Lonergans were still alive long after that morning. What the sea sent back. Before we get to that, the ocean kept sending pieces of them home. Several months after the couple vanished, more of their equipment washed up on a beach near Port Douglas, about 75 miles from where they'd gone down. There were 2 inflatable dive jackets, the kind called buoyancy vests, that let a diver float without any effort, and both had Tom and Eileen's names on them. Their compressed air tanks turned up too, along with one of Eileen's fins. Then, a full 8 years later, another fin appeared in the surf, with the Lonergan name inside it. The sea gave them back slowly, and it left nothing out. Each item said something. The air tanks still had a little air left in them, which told investigators the couple had likely ditched them on purpose, once they understood the outer edge was never coming back, and the weight was doing them no good. The wetsuit had its own timeline built in. Scientists dated it by the barnacles growing on the zipper. Barnacles grow at a steady pace, so the amount on the suit told them it had been in the water since late January, right when Tom and Eileen disappeared. The hardest part to explain is the jackets. Those vests were the one thing keeping them on the surface. Pulling them off in open water makes no sense on its face. The leading theory is a hard one. After a day and a night with no fresh water, under a hard sun, with salt water only making the thirst worse, the mind starts to go. Either they were too far gone to know what they were doing, or in a last, desperate push, they dropped the weight to try and swim for land. And this was all happening to 2 people who had every reason to be terrified. By their second day out there, sunburned and cracked with thirst, they may have watched boats pass in the distance without ever turning their way. That kind of fear pulls a person's judgment apart, and it makes choices that look impossible from dry land start to feel like the only option left. Nobody swims 40 miles. Not like that. The ones who say they lived now to the theory the loose threads keep feeding. Some people believe Tom and Eileen never died at all. Over the years, more than 20 people from around Australia came forward, claiming they'd seen the couple after the day they supposedly drowned. That fed a rumor that the Lonergans had faked the whole thing, gotten picked up by a boat a mile from the dive site, and started a new life somewhere far away. It's a tidy story, and it falls apart the moment you check what they left behind. Their bank accounts were never touched. Their passports stayed where they were. Their insurance was never claimed. Nobody walks away into a brand new life while leaving their money, their identity, and a free payout sitting on the table. On top of that, pulling off a fake would have needed the crew to actually track their numbers, and that's the one thing this whole story proves never happened. Take that away, and the faked death idea sinks with it. What's left is the version nobody wants, the one where two real people were floating out there, alone and doing everything right, while the coast carried on as if they'd never existed. 2 days and no alarm. So how did two people vanish off a busy dive boat without anyone raising the alarm? The answer is almost harder to take than the disappearance itself. When the Outer Edge got back to Port Douglas, a crew member found a bag on board with no owner. He assumed it was forgotten luggage and handed it to Lost and Found. The hostel where Tom and Eileen were staying sent a shuttle for them, and when they didn't turn up, the driver had a quick look around the shops and let it go. Somebody spotted that the couple had left their shoes at the dive shop and figured they'd simply walked back on their own. One clue after another got explained away. The next morning, January 26th, the Outer Edge went straight back to St. Crispin's Reef with a new group of divers. One of them found 2 weight belts on the sea floor, right where Tom and Eileen were last seen. A weight belt is what a diver wears so the air in their gear doesn't float them to the surface, and you don't drop one by accident. But nobody knew there was anyone to look for, so the crew shrugged it off as a lucky find and kept diving. That same afternoon, only a few miles away, the couple may still have been alive. It wasn't until January 27th, 2 full days after that dive, that the boat's owner, a man named Jeffrey Nairn, noticed the unclaimed bag still sitting in Lost and Found. He opened it, found Tom's wallet, and finally called the police. Once the alarm went up, the response was massive. Boats and aircraft swept the water for 3 days, the Navy and civilian vessels all in it together. They found nothing but a few scattered pieces of gear in the weeks and months that followed. For the crew, the 25th had been just another run out to the reef and back. That's the part that's hard to hold in your head. An ordinary day, so routine that 2 people could drop out of it completely, and the boat still docked on time with everyone certain the count had gone fine. The dive that went wrong. To understand how the count failed, you have to go back to who Tom and Eileen were, and how they ended up on that boat. Tom and Eileen had met at Louisiana State University and married back in Texas in 1988. Eileen was the diver first. She'd taken up scuba back home in Louisiana and talked Tom into learning it with her. By 1998, they were both experienced, married about 10 years, and near the end of a long trip. She was 28, he was 33. Before they flew out to the reef, they'd called their families to say how excited they were, and that call turned out to be the last anyone back home would hear from them. They'd just finished a stint in the Peace Corps out in the Pacific, and on the way home, they weren't about to skip the most famous reef on Earth. That's how they came to board the Outer Edge, along with 24 other divers, bound for a site about 40 miles offshore. Because they were confident in the water, Tom and Eileen asked to break off and dive on their own. That request was never written into the log. When the diving was done, the skipper called for a head count, the way every dive boat is supposed to. Count everyone off the boat. Count everyone back on. And don't leave until the numbers match. But halfway through the count, 2 divers jumped back into the water. That threw the tally off by 2. The crew assumed those were the last people still climbing aboard, and the numbers were marked complete. Some accounts suggest the crew was fairly green. Either way, the outer edge turned for home, with 2 people still out on the reef behind it. Why nobody reached them? There's one more cruel detail, and it's the water itself. The day was clear, calm, and warm. That has led a lot of people to ask why the couple didn't just swim to safety. There was a large buoy nearby, and lit diving platforms sat only a few miles off. From the deck of a boat, you'd spot them without trying. From down at the surface, with your eyes at wave height, they mostly vanish from view. Tom had also left his glasses back on the outer edge, so his sight was poor to begin with, and the platforms sat up current, which meant reaching them was fighting the ocean the entire way. Add in the heat, the thirst, and the raw fear of realizing no one was coming, and you get 2 people whose judgment was slipping by the hour. What looked like an easy swim from a boat deck was, in reality, a long shot in open sea. Every way out was farther than it looked, and harder than it seemed from dry land. The reckoning. In the end, someone had to answer for it. Later, in 1998, a coroner's inquest ruled that Tom and Eileen had been unlawfully killed. The next year, Jeffrey Nairn was charged with their manslaughter. At trial, his defense reached for those diaries, using the couple's dark private thoughts to raise the idea that maybe they'd faked their own deaths after all. Nairn's own account of the day was almost worse than any cover story. He'd ordered a head count. It got scrambled when 2 divers jumped back in, and the boat sailed home short 2 people without anyone catching it. The jury found him not guilty. In a separate civil case, though, his company pleaded guilty to negligence and was fined for breaking safety rules. The criminal charge didn't stick, but the court costs and the fallout finished the business, and the outer edge shut down. The case rattled the whole North Queensland dive industry, and the state brought in far tougher rules for how boats count their passengers. So a mistake this simple couldn't happen the same way again. The official finding, in the end, was the plain one. With no bodies and no wreck, investigators concluded that Tom and Eileen most likely died of exposure and drowning, left in open water with no real chance of rescue. That's the legacy the couple left behind. 2 names on a pile of recovered gear, and a set of safety rules written because of how they died. The truth open water left out. Open water gave audiences a clean kind of fear. Sharks in the dark, a fast and violent end, a monster to point at. And that's exactly why the film works, because a monster is easier to sit with than the truth. The truth is that there probably was no monster. There were 2 experienced divers who did nearly everything right. They surfaced where they were meant to. They stayed together. They kept their heads long enough to write down what happened and ask for help. And none of it mattered, because the one thing that could have saved them, someone on that boat counting to the right number, never happened. For the people who loved them, that's the wound that never really closes. There's no grave to visit, and no certain ending, just a slate with a date on it, and a stretch of ocean that never explained itself. Every year since, the anniversary has come and gone, without an answer. They weren't taken by the deep. They were forgotten on it. Somewhere off St. Crispin's Reef, on a warm afternoon in January 1998, Tom and Eileen Lonergan watched their only ride home shrink to a dot and disappear. What they lived through in the hours after that is the one part of this story the sea has never given back.